Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today we're diving into something a little different and a lot of fun. I've picked up some of Warlord Games' Black Powder Epic Battles Waterloo British Infantry, and I'm going to paint these without referring to the box or the box art or any pictures online. No box art, no official paint guide, just vibes, instinct, and see how good my memory is. It should be fun to just paint without stopping to check that everything is correct, and I'm going to just enjoy the process and see how accurate the end result is. So grab your brushes, prime your minis, and let's see where this creative journey takes us. Let's paint some history, my own way. Prime the models with a zenithal highlight by spraying the models black and then with some white from above. This is so the details stand out, as it's easy to miss things at this scale. First of all, with my fist and red, I'm going to paint the coats. I'm picking out all of the visible parts to the famous redcoats of the British soldiers from this period. I'm trying to avoid painting over areas that I don't want to be red, although some tidying up will be inevitable. I'm hoping I can use the zenithal prime to help make the painting a bit easier in the later stages. The redcoats are going to be the main detail of these miniatures, as they really are small epic scale minis. On the table, the red will be the most recognisable detail of them. Another advantage of the zenithal prime is that it will also work as some undershading. At this scale, highlighting can be really difficult, so using the undershading effect will add to the contrast between the light and dark areas, which is really useful for painting minis at this scale. I'm only applying a thin layer of Mephiston red, enough so it has solid coverage, but still thin enough to allow that undershading to show through. I'm also making sure I paint the coats on the back of the mini as well. These minis go in 2 ranks on a base, so the back might be a little bit covered, but it's still always the best to paint them. And with the red coats painted, the models have that pop of colour, and the most important part is painted. Now with Eshen Grey, I'm going to paint the trousers. I remember the models on the front of the box having a dark grey to black for their trousers, so Eshen Grey should work for this. Once again, I'm letting that undershade show through because I don't really want to have to highlight these trousers, as it would be really hard to just add any highlights without making the trousers look too bright. So I'm just applying a layer of Eshen Grey all over the trousers, front and back, while being careful at the tops so I don't accidentally paint over the red coat. I don't have to be too careful when painting the rest of the trousers, as there isn't really any other detail, as the legs are nice and simple to paint. And with the trousers painted, the next thing I'm going to paint are the boots and hats. For these I'm using Corvus Black. And first I'm painting the boots, both front and back. I'm using Corvus Black for this so that at a later stage I can add a shade to these areas, and this shade will add a little bit more definition to the finished model and hopefully allow some of the details on the mini to stand out. After the boots, I'm going to paint the black hats. For these I'm being careful when I come near the skin, as I don't want to accidentally paint over any skin, as I'll be painting this with a contrast paint later, so I want to leave that as bright as possible. There are a few details on the hats, so I'm trying to avoid the feather, but this will be painted over later, so it's not an issue if it gets a little bit of black on it. I am painting over the metal plate on the front, and there's a band on the hats as well, which I'm also painting over. But I'll be painting these details later, so it's easier to just paint them black now. I'm also painting the back of the hats. The undershading should also work for the hats as well, as long as the black isn't too thick. A bit of the brighter edges should show through, giving me a slight highlight effect, like on the trousers, saving me from having to highlight black at a tiny scale. With the black painted, these small models are already starting to get that Waterloo soldier look. So now with Macragge Blue, I'm going to paint the cuffs. I remember the models on the box having coloured cuffs on the models, so I'm painting these ones blue. I'm not a historical expert by any means, but I'm pretty sure different regiments had different coloured cuffs to their coats to mark them apart, so you can give your soldiers whatever colour cuffs you want. These blue cuffs add a bit more colour and interest to the model, which at this scale, every little bit of extra detail I can add is always a bonus. With the cuffs picked out, it's added that pop of colour to the model, so the next thing I'm going to do is apply a shade. For this I'm using Known Oil, which I'm thinning with just a little bit of water. And I'm applying this all over the areas I've already painted. I'm trying to only get this over areas I've painted to add some extra definition to these areas. I'm avoiding the areas I haven't painted yet and just applying this slightly thinned down Known Oil coat to the cuffs, trousers and hats. As this is thinned down, it shouldn't be too dark in the recesses, just slightly darken them down, and also add a bit of black lining around the details, which will also help make the details easier to see at the small scale. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And if you'd like to support the channel, please become a member by pressing the join button down below or joining me over on Patreon. With the shade dry, you can see how it's added a bit more definition to the details on the model. So now with some Gulliman Flesh contrast paint, I'm going to paint the skin. I'm applying the contrast paint over the face and the hands to the model. The contrast should work with the Zenithal Prime and give a good enough looking skin by allowing the details to be highlighted while also adding some shade into the recesses. I'm being careful to only get this onto the areas of skin, being careful with the hands holding the rifles, as I'll be painting the rifles in the next step and I don't want any skin colour on these areas. The Gulliman Flesh has given a reasonable look to the skin, especially for this scale. So now with some Cygor Brown, I'm going to paint the wood on the rifles. The Cygor Brown should give a nice dark wood effect on the weapons. I'm hoping that the contrast paint will find any details on the rifles and bring that out. I'm carefully painting the wood to the rifles, leaving the tip of the barrels and the bayonets, as I'll be painting these later. I'm being careful to not get any of this contrast paint over any other details other than the rifles, as it's a very dark colour. It's going to be quite hard to paint over. And with the rifles painted, the models are really coming together. So now with some Evil Sun Scarlet, I'm going to add some highlights to the coats. With this bright red, I'm applying it to some areas of the jacket that I want to stand out a little bit more. So I'm catching areas like the bottom of the jacket. And I'm also going to catch any large areas of fabric, so the arms that the shade didn't settle in. And I'm making sure that I leave any shaded areas, and also leaving some areas that are just the pure Mephiston red, but selecting some select areas to brighten up with the Evil Sun Scarlet. The highlight will make a few details stand out and brighten up the jacket, which should make the model stand out a little bit more on the tabletop. I also think a slightly brightened coats are just a better look. With the coat highlighted, next I'm going to brighten the cuffs. For this I'm using Calgar Blue, and I'm carefully applying a small edge highlight to the cuff. This will brighten the cuffs a bit and add a tiny bit more detail to the model. These highlights are very small. I'm just touching the very tip of the brush to the top and bottom of the cuff, leaving a bit of Macragge blue showing through in the middle. There are quite a few cuffs to catch with this highlight, but it is a nice and quick step. With the cuffs highlighted, there's only one large area left to paint, and that's the white areas. So I'll be painting these with white scar, and I'm painting all of the white straps on the model. I'm applying this more like a highlight than fully painting these areas. Where that Zenithal Prime has already caught these areas, they already have an off-white colour showing. So I'm leaving that off-white effect in the recesses and applying the white scar to the large areas to brighten them up. For the straps, this means painting the middle of each strap, but leaving the darker areas at the edges to keep the definition of the model. There are quite a lot of white straps on this model, but picking them out really brightens up the model and gives them that historical look. Now, I don't remember seeing any pictures of the back of these models from the box, but I'm going to assume the backpacks are also white. For these, I'm just highlighting the raised details on the backpacks, leaving that Zenithal showing through, which will add some definition and give the impression of shadow on these parts. I'm keeping these highlights nice and small, just catching any of the raised details and the edges of the backpacks. I'm also applying an edge highlight to any of the bags or pouches on these models. These could probably be painted brown for a leather effect, but I quite like the look of the white bags on these models. And finally, the hats have this band going around the front, which I'm also painting with white scar. Rather than just painting this as a line of white, I'm applying the white as small spots. This is to try and give the impression that the band is made out of some kind of rope, so the small spots should add the impression that there's some texture and hopefully add some interest to this area. And with all the white painted, these models are really coming together now. Only a few details left to paint. So now with some Liberator Gold, I'm going to paint all of the gold details. So there's this metal plate on the hat. And this buckle kind of thing in the middle of the torso. I'm picking both of these out with some Liberator Gold. I'm using Liberator Gold for this, so it should look like a bright gold. Retributor armor would also work for this, just giving a slightly darker appearance. And with the gold picked out, next I'm going to paint the silver details. For this I'm using Stormhost Silver. And I'm picking out the tip of the barrel to the rifle and the bayonet. And I'm catching the flintlock mechanism as well. The bayonets are easy to paint as they're quite large areas, and the mechanism can be picked out with just a quick spot of silver on the small raised area. With all the metal details painted, there is just one detail left to paint, and that's the feather. For this, I'm starting off with white scar, and I'm painting all over the feather with white. This will cover up any paint that's accidentally got onto the feathers, as well as giving a nice solid bright white all over the feather. I'm being careful not to accidentally paint over anything other than the feather, but I'm making sure that I catch all of it, front and back, with a layer of white scar. Now the feathers have been picked out with white, I'm going to add a colour to the lower half of each feather. For these I'm using Evil Sun Scarlet. and I'm painting the bottom half of each feather with some red, and I'm just catching that lower half with a layer of Evil Sun Scarlet that will add that bit of colour that Napoleonic soldiers have. With the feathers painted, that is my British soldiers painted from memory of the box colour paint scheme. What do you think of the finished result? Do you think it's close to the ones on the box? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me paint more historical models or more epic scale minis. And thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you can, come and join me over on Patreon, where I have a free tier so you can come and join my painting community. And happy painting!